120 world leaders cooped up inside one building.
That big meeting going on in Copenhagen, if there's going to be a deal on how to save the planet, it's got to happen.
Mohamed Nasheed, the president of the Maldives.
Which is what climate change poses to the world economy.
How much attention?
World leaders holding some closed-door talks, and they're really trying to work out some type of last-minute agreement.
Mr. President.
The negotiators are still unable to come up with a text. So let's keep our fingers crossed. We could still come out with a deal. Thank you.
How climate change is affecting your country?
Well, Maldives is just 1.5 meters above sea level. And because of climate change and sea level rise, the number of our islands are eroding. And it's not something in the future. It is something that we are facing right now. Thank you. I think I have to go. Thank you very much.
Les Maldives, ce sont 2000 îles minuscules dans l'océan Indien. Un pays très plat, sans même une colline. Je l'ai parcouru maintes fois d'un bout à l'autre. On a beau y avoir passé toute sa vie, on ne se lasse pas de l'admirer. On sait que l'homme vit sur cet archipel depuis des milliers d'années, en parfaite harmonie avec l'océan. Mais le monde change. Le climat se réchauffe. Le niveau de la mer monte. La vie sur ces îles est devenue extrêmement fragile. Si on ne parvient pas à stopper le réchauffement climatique, l'océan engloutira les Maldives. En tant que président de ce pays, je ferai du combat pour notre survie ma priorité. Pour beaucoup, les Maldives ne sont qu'un lieu de vacances. Une villégiature pour gens riches et célèbres. La quintessence de la belle vie. Entre le paradis et le paradis. Avec ses eaux turquoises, son sable doré, ses hôtels et ses clubs ultra luxueux. Mais rares sont ceux qui connaissent l'histoire des Maldives de ces 30 dernières années. Or, c'est sur ces mêmes plages paradisiaques qu'ont été commis la plupart des actes de torture.
J'ai vu des gens suspendus par les pieds, couverts de sucre de coco, pour que les fourmis viennent les dévorer. J'ai vu des gens à moitié enterrés, exposés pendant des jours et des jours à la pluie et au soleil. J'ai tout vu de mes propres yeux, car j'ai passé 5 ans là-bas. Voilà ce qu'était le régime de Gayoom.
Gayoom est resté 30 ans au pouvoir. Il n'y avait pas d'opposition, pas de parti politique, pas de liberté d'expression ni de réunion.
Les chefs des différentes îles juraient que pas un seul électeur n'avait voté contre Gayoom. Il obtenait 99% des voix la plupart du temps. C'est n'importe quoi. Dieu lui-même ne remporte pas 99% des suffrages.
C'était un chef mafieux. Dans les 3 premiers mois de son mandat, il a fait 480 prisonniers politiques. C'était délirant.
Quand j'étais enfant, président se disait Mamoun. Point. Il était le seul et unique président. On ne nous parlait jamais de ceux qui l'avaient précédé.
J'ai fait mes études en Angleterre. En 1989, mon diplôme en poche, je suis rentré aux Maldives. Le régime était devenu de plus en plus répressif. Alors on s'est dit que ce serait une bonne idée de fonder un magazine.
Nachid et moi, et quelques autres, on a lancé un journal, le Sangu. C'était un journal politique.
On y parlait de corruption et de violation des droits de l'homme. On était très critique à l'égard du régime. Une nuit, vers 3 heures, ils ont débarqué chez moi. Ils ont fouillé toute la maison. Et ils sont repartis chargés de documents.
Ils l'ont emmené au beau milieu de la nuit. Et on avait entendu tellement d'histoires sur ce qu'il faisait aux prisonniers. On était terrifiés.
J'ai refusé d'avouer quoi que ce soit. Alors on m'a enfermé dans une cellule en tôle ondulée. Elle mesurait 1,50 m sur 1 mètre. Il y avait un matelas. C'est tout. On se fait un programme pour la journée, même si on ne peut pas bouger. On va se faire une balade en imagination. Et si on peut marcher, si on n'est pas enchaîné, on fait 4 ou 5 pas dans la cellule, des millions de fois. On prend chaque seconde comme elle vient. 18 mois à l'isolement. C'est interminable. Quand on m'a libéré, j'étais très motivé. Je voulais créer un parti politique.
Avec un enfant, c'était de la folie. Mais je n'avais pas trop le choix. J'aurais pu le quitter, mais ça ne l'aurait pas arrêté.
En 20 ans, j'ai été arrêté 12 fois. Et torturé 2 fois. Mon deuxième enfant est né alors que j'étais à l'isolement. On m'a conduit à l'hôpital tôt le matin. Laïla avait accouché la veille. On m'a apporté Zaya, je l'ai prise dans mes bras. Et on m'a renvoyé en prison. En septembre 2003, un jeune homme a été torturé, battu à mort en prison.
Son corps était couvert d'ecchymoses et de blessures, de la tête aux pieds. Tuer quelqu'un, c'est une chose, mais là, manifestement, il avait été torturé à mort.
J'en ai vu très souvent des passages à tabac. J'ai moi-même été frappé. Je sais ce qu'on ressent quand la mort est là, toute proche. Les gens ont vu le corps, et c'est là que le mouvement pour la démocratie a vraiment démarré.
Ça a été le moment décisif.
Des émeutes ont éclaté aux Maldives.
J'ai reçu un appel d'un ami aux Maldives. J'ai compris qu'il était en train de courir dans la rue. J'entendais le bruit de pas dans le téléphone. Il m'a dit qu'il venait de donner un coup de poing à un policier du service national de sécurité. Que les gens saccageaient la ville, détruisant tout ce qui symbolisait l'État. Ils incendiaient les voitures de police.
Le gouvernement a déclaré l'état d'urgence pour contenir les troubles.
On avait peur. Ils avaient sorti les chars. On se demandait ce qui allait se passer.
Je craignais vraiment pour ma vie. Quand j'ai su ce qu'ils avaient fait à ce jeune homme, j'ai compris que pour sauver le régime, ils étaient obligés de me faire subir le même sort. Alors cette fois, dès qu'on m'a relâché, je suis parti. J'ai pris le chemin de l'exil.
President Gayoom has ruled almost unchallenged since 1978.
People that I've spoken to in the Maldives are frightened to talk to me openly.
It's not true.
But they are.
I assure you that's not true.
Well, you're telling me I'm lying.
I'm not saying you are lying, but you are not well informed.
À l'époque, ça faisait un bon moment qu'on militait depuis l'étranger. Mais ça ne nous empêchait pas d'être très bien organisés. Et donc de faire pas mal pression sur le gouvernement.
Et c'est là que le tsunami leur est tombé dessus.
Le tsunami de 2004 a ravagé les Maldives. Des îles entières ont été abandonnées. Le tsunami nous a confrontés au réchauffement climatique. Il nous a rappelé à quel point la vie humaine est fragile ici.
En une heure, plus de 50% du PIB ont été engloutis. Le régime a eu vraiment besoin d'argent. Et là, les Européens ont dit « On vous donne 100 millions de dollars en échange de réformes politiques ».
Gayoom n'a cédé que sur certains points, quand il y était contraint et forcé. Jamais il n'a introduit de véritables changements. En exil, on avait fondé le Parti démocratique des Maldives. Mais il fallait aller plus loin. Or, il était impossible d'établir le parti dans le pays sans que je prenne le risque de me rendre sur place.
On a tous pensé que son retour était une grave erreur, qu'il se ferait arrêter à l'aéroport.
On devait descendre dans la rue pour réclamer des réformes. De façon pacifique, bien sûr. Mais il fallait absolument faire pression sur Gayoom.
Quand le mouvement a été lancé, je me suis dit que soit Nasheed se ferait assassiner par Gayoom, soit il finirait président.
On a défié le régime. On a tendu un piège à Gayoom, et on l'a eu.
On aurait vraiment dit que les Maldives étaient occupées.
Je mentirais si je disais que je n'avais pas peur. Mais Annie répétait sans cesse, il faut s'encourager mutuellement. Serrez-vous les coudes.
Il y avait des manifestations partout dans le pays. D'énormes rassemblements à Fares Masoda, à Tinadou, à Kinbidou, à Oukuros. Plein d'îles étaient touchées. Le mouvement se répandait comme une traînée de poudre. Il a pris une telle ampleur que Gayoom a dû finalement céder et autoriser la tenue d'élections libres.
Tous mes amis parlaient de démocratie. Sur les murs, il y avait des graffitis. Votez pour la démocratie. Abba Mamoun, vive Annie. C'est là que je me suis dit que les choses avaient changé.
On a fait des sondages d'opinion qui donnaient Gayoom vainqueur. Mais Annie m'a dit qu'on avait du temps devant nous, qu'il fallait faire campagne, aller à la rencontre de la population.
On a visité presque chaque maison, plus de 52 000 au total. Même les gens les plus fidèles au régime nous écoutaient.
The president says he needs another term to see through his democratic reforms.
He's already had 30 years, and we really quite can't see how and what else he's going to do with another 5 years.
Gayoom était tellement sûr de gagner qu'il a même commandé des feux d'artifice.
Sur mon île, j'essayais d'obtenir le maximum d'intentions de vote.
On actualisait le site Minivan News en temps réel.
Je me trouvais dans un pub du XVIIIe siècle, à Glencoe, en Écosse.
Les premiers résultats sont tombés vers 20 h, je crois.
Nasheed menait de 10%. Je me suis dit que c'était une avance confortable.
Vers 21 h, on était surexcités. Moi, j'y croyais.
L'une après l'autre, on vidait les urnes. À environ 3 h du matin, on était convaincus qu'il avait gagné.
Aux 3/4 du dépouillement, le journal a annoncé les résultats. Gros titre, la victoire pour Annie. J'en suis tombé de mon tabouret.
Au lever du soleil, les gens ont peu à peu commencé à se rassembler sur la grande plage de surf de Malais. Et là, ils ont entonné cette très belle chanson traditionnelle, très ancienne, qui dit « Main dans la main, accomplissons le vœu de la nation ».
Le sentiment qui dominait ce jour-là, c'était qu'ils avaient tort et qu'on avait raison depuis le début. On était dans le vrai.
On avait repris possession de notre pays.
En accédant au pouvoir, on a cru que la bataille était gagnée. Mais dès les premiers conseils des ministres, on a vu que la plupart des questions à traiter étaient des questions d'ordre climatique. Les changements en cours affectaient considérablement l'industrie de la pêche. Le littoral s'érodait. Nos îles risquaient d'être inondées.
Understand how it works. Mihar ahma sida goten hedene hadan je hetan tambe se bahure ultimately algon men deken je heni e bote dehas rak salam kuranje nice aslam asante hello aslam and me construction industry aharmen karya me ane concession hodan anneruga එමියුන්කාරී ගහම වර සාප්කෝ ඉගෙන් බි කොම් බයකා කන්ති වාහක දක්කනේ මියුරියාකම කාරණක ෆන්ඩෙන් නුකර වෙන්නේ දේ රීච් को किया ओके मी हुड़माले योची हम एमी हुई योटु बांधे 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 पूरी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट काहे कीगा योटे बांधे एवा एम मी गागणक माउमून देहा सारा कुसुर पेरिगे den deha sategga soyko poen ecche meha ronnani hama khande eligen jiballa doida doida den huriye em ehuriya ecche balala ha ehuriya ecche trace kodamme ei alugonu men ge huri mussandi kan munge tereng meraj sayama kurwen gote kan alugonu men bisna jen.
So the position of the Maldives is, well, wasn't survival is non-negotiable? Right? That's the climate change position. So
the reason why Maldives is unique is because we're going to lose an entire nation, an identity, culture, and all these things. That's because there's so many other countries. There's Netherlands, there's Nigeria, but none of these countries, they're going to lose their entire national identity. We will. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا
වර එන මිල කන්නුන් ඉන්නනේ වා මිකුවම ගරගංගේ වරුන්දී බඩ වඩකන් ඉන්නේ මිට එහෙදි දී කාන්දුනා ඇති දෙවනක දගරගන් ගොස්සේ හැම
මේ ගාව ගන්නනේ ෆර්නේ මීගන්නේ මිතන් Ebe kandiadia wehte.
Kandiadia salama veto.
Salama veto wala vega.
To silamdi. Ele ka ebi kade to silape. Keda. Na mele ko me la la jeni to si.
Ela toshiri me ke handal nonde.
Embena phena ke lona ganda uhi. Emme ama ralaye jumai kiaraga.
India's masarikama sama uday waraka dehas pahe dehas saye dehas ateke itu warab bane wara enge warad hama wara masarika me asem yote musuma ettade me vai jehuma kala sarani milaka bumula saw kandi oyini dai emasala apinna emma kona lafaveni
me amko ke waraka bereshi
amko erana utai be ne tirantam bai datam bai e jakaba be adami be ne ma ke hatte dora kiloma emme warad dakwa dehas no na harema warab modatan dekonuge ushre masari nam duwahada sevenna nibene waruge datiko
The President of the Maldives has announced this week that his country plans to be the first in the world to go carbon neutral, meeting all of its energy requirements through renewable sources such as solar and wind power. It hopes to complete the transition within a decade.
Today, I can announce to you and the world that the Maldives will be the first carbon neutral country in the world. We hope to be, and we have planned to become carbon neutral in the next 10 years. And we feel that we can achieve this. Paul, what's the speech? What are we doing in England?
You're doing keynote speech in Parliament, so that gives you a big degree of leeway to almost say whatever you want.
Fundamentally, our main point is we do not go according with the pack.
Yeah. And that's why
we talk about whatever has to be said.
Okay.
The other thing is, we want to say, if you can't defend the Maldives today, you can't defend England tomorrow.
Because if you can't save the Maldives, that means we've probably had about 2 degrees of global warming.
It's the domino theory all over again.
Yeah.
It's the Vietnam, and please come and defend Vietnam.
Well, we won't put it quite like that, but I get your point.
But even if you don't put it, I'm going to say it.
Which makes me so nervous.
I want to cause the way from Nami Badal Kolani. Godan one, we Mimberkum, I want me Badani, come who could do a hako. Radio Gizaria, the Befuna could have a good colleague, here the cultivator. ಈಗ ಆಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೋಮತಳ ಒಯ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಟ್ ಹುಳುಮ್ಗೆ ಹಫ್ನಾಗ ಬಾಯರುಮ ಅವನ್ ಮಿಕೊಳಂಗ ಆಯರುಗ ಹಮ ಮೂಸು ಮರಗ ಅದಕ್ಕೋ ಮತಿ ತೆಂಗೇರು ಆಳ್ಕೊಂಡ ನಡುವಿಗೆಂದಿಯ ಬಾರಶುಗ ನಗೂರೋಳಿ ಆಸ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ಬಾರಶುಗೆ ಈತ ಗೇಕ ಗೆದ್ದು ವಿರಿಯಮ ಮೀ ಆಮುಕೊಂ ಆಳ್ಕೊಂಡ ಮೆನ ಕೊಮ್ಮೆ ಹರಕೊ ಇಹಾ ಗಿನಾಂಗ್ ಇವೆ ಅಡೆನ್ನು ಆಳ್ಕೊಂಡ ಉಮ್ಮೀದ್ ಪುರಂಗ್ ವಿಭಾವತುಗೆ kankan algon mena abadu dimanuwe nan gotaka kankan meduri wanakama agondu medu nimmalu kuriga danwagan beenum naadaka agonde bedam sinduwaham ingres da mi datureki ingres laatuge parliament ga algonda tagrir kuruma libun fursatege beenum hifumattaka kura dature walhamdulillah warabada shukriya.
I was to summarise the state of the science, it would be that everything is worse than we originally thought. Sea level rise, way outside what the models projected. It's much, much higher. And this is the real key one here. These are global emissions. And the worst case scenario was this red line. And you can see 2005, 2006, 2007 are above the red line. So again, in terms of the drivers for climate change and sea level rise, we're way outside what anyone expected. And most of that's China and India. So all of this time that we spend talking and all of these meetings we have at Copenhagen and everywhere else, the temperature is rising. And I think people forget that. So the worst case scenario in sea levels, if you take into account ice sheets and how oceans behave and so on, is 2 meters by 2100. Can you deal with that?
The 2 meters we can't survive, no.
Right. And with carbon dioxide levels at current, 387 parts per million, eventually we'll see 25 meters of sea level rise. The only way to get the situation turned around is to get CO2 down again. We need to get back to 350 parts per million. So we've got to somehow remove the extra CO2 from the atmosphere.
This is the problem. We need to start talking about the solution. How do we actually get carbon emissions down?
We need to just clear the table. None of it is working. India and Brazil, they're not agreeing to it.
So at Copenhagen, when the eyes of the world are on you, you've actually got to do something to really make that moment count.
So we need to get India, China and Brazil on our side.
And the US. Well, I mean, they're the key drivers of emissions that you can expect.
Indian politicians or Chinese or Brazilian politicians, they're not willing to stop opening up power plants. They like cutting ribbons. And politicians like that. And it's going to be very difficult asking them to stop that. But instead, if we ask them to cut more ribbons... Green ribbons, and more of it, twice more, then it might work. Do you understand what I mean? Do you think it's workable?
Yeah, we just have to show them.
I will go with it to the Indian government.
And you can pick up the phone and speak to these people?
Yes, we can pick up the phone and speak to them.
Go back.
Middle minute. All right. Maldives is a frontline state. And when you have millions and billions of people in similar predicaments, just imagine the impact it would have on world order or security. We know that Maldives becoming carbon neutral is not going to stop us from annihilation. We know that. But at least we could die knowing that we've done the right thing.
Yeah, bro, you keep stressing. They are in India or China, they are. You don't have to sort of, label this.
Mr. President, have you seen today's Times?
No, let's have a look.
The headlines are a bit strong, but the content of the article's all right. This one down there. I mean, the war analogy kind of works. I mean,
that's a good one. I agree with that.
Just.
Can I ask how long you've been president?
Well, it's been 7 months now.
7 months in. You had a long struggle to get there. I think you said you'd spent some time in jail for your political beliefs. And now you're fighting climate change. You do like a battle, don't you?
Well, it won't be any good to have democracy if we don't have a country.
What do you think needs to come out of Copenhagen if there's any chance of your country's survival?
There has to be a deal that satisfies both the developed countries and the developing countries.
And your language is quite strong on this topic.
Well, it's a human right. I mean, come on, we cannot not talk about our existence as a country. We've been there for the last 3,000 years. We have a culture, we have a language, we have a civilization. But I feel that it can work. And so therefore, I am hopeful that at Copenhagen there will be an understanding amicable for everyone. And if we can't come up with this understanding, then, you know, God help us. Just in time. Dada! Hold on.
President Nasheed, thank you very much for this. So this is your first trip to the U.S.?
Well, it is. I have come for a summit of the small island states and also for the United Nations General Assembly.
Sometimes in this whole climate change discussion, people find it difficult. You still must get people come up to you and say, Mr. President, there's a job killer if we try to limit the CO2 that goes into the atmosphere.
That's not true at all. It would create more jobs.
What is the plan if indeed we can't stop global warming?
If we can't stop global warming, it's adaptation. How do we adapt to the new reality? Concrete and embankment to protect these islands. But mind you, it's not just the Maldives. It's hundreds of millions of people. Ultimately, we are talking about New York. Manhattan is as low as Mali.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted on the 20th anniversary of the formation of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States to welcome you to this historic OASIS Summit on climate change.
Prime Minister, please be very frank and tell me if I'm wrong. Is this the document that you really thought it would be? Because cost of protection is very crucial for us and it's very, very expensive. We can't do it ourselves. For instance, in the Maldives, the wall around Male, our capital city, has cost us $600 million. And that's just one island.
Yeah.
We have 2,000 islands.
So what you're saying is the document should focus more on adaptation?
It should focus more on adaptation and it should focus more on renewable energy.
It could be a matter of wording, how certain statements could be changed.
It is okay, but we need to have an agreement. We are hoping that if we can have an agreement among ourselves, so that we can speak in one voice, we might be able to achieve better.
Je lui remercie porte-parole à tout. Je pense que c'est bien exprimé.
Spoke about the Indian Ocean, and we thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll try to raise our issue, the points. We all know that no one is going to do anything with this document. I am bunch of small islands with no clout and anything, and we are coming up with this. Prime Minister, I understand that a lot of people have been working, all the civil servants have been working for 2 years. I understand. Our people have been doing it. Our people are not agreeing with me either. But if we go with that document, and we will hit the wall in Copenhagen, where India, China, Brazil, United States, big emitters, they're not going to go along with that. I think we have a better chance of getting something out of Copenhagen if we try and shift the focus to doing things instead of asking them not to do things.
But this is a substantial introduction to the text. That, I mean, if you put it on the table...
It's not.
Yes, it is.
It's well
because
in
why? Because
no,
why?
Please, it's well in line with what is already in the arguments in UNFCCC.
It was a wildfire being effort paid off. Lima karara ada orang muhimu istaham salat pas kurwati.
They feel that they got the best chance if they can go and have this offense.
The world is increasing its emissions today. This increase could submerge several small island states.
But the entire world needs to join in this effort to reduce this.
If we do not act on time, all of us would become leaders and citizens of failed states.
Good morning, Minister. Afternoon, ma'am.
The recognition that the threat from climate change is serious, it is urgent, and it is growing.
Distinguished delegates, yesterday at the AOC's summit, we asked the major emitters to agree to produce enough clean energy to attain the targets of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and 350 ppm of carbon concentration. The threats posed to the Maldives from climate change are well known. Weather events will make it harder and harder to govern the country until a point reaches when we must consider abandoning our homeland. We in the Maldives desperately want to believe that one day our words will have an effect. And so we continue to shout them even though deep down we know that you're not really listening.
Le désastre est imminent. Tout le monde le sait. Et pourtant, ce sont des tas d'autres questions qui sont sur le tapis, comme celle du conflit arabo-israélien. À quoi bon se faire la guerre si de toute façon on est tous condamnés? C'est lassant, c'est épuisant. Mais on s'accroche, on ne lâche jamais. Moi, ça fait un bon moment que je m'accroche.
The President of Maldives made a splash by holding the first underwater cabinet meeting of the world to draw attention to the issue of climate change.
The Maldives could become the world's first country of environmental refugees.
Something unusual was taking place. The President of the Maldives made a call to the world to reduce carbon in the atmosphere to much safer levels. 350 parts per million. Compared with today's 387. The President says if these reductions aren't made, his whole country risks going underwater.
We are trying to send our message, let the world know what will happen to the Maldives if climate change is not checked. This is a challenging situation. And we would like to see that people actually do something about it. You would have heard Falcon Energy and General Electric's working on a wind farm. And they have a backup gas plant.
Yes. The wind turbines I'm happy about. There's absolutely reductions, major reductions. But the point is burning natural gas, even as a backup, it's still a fossil fuel, and to go properly carbon neutral, you'll have to switch it off in 2019.
No, we can't choose. We are not in that position, and we are only, my feeling is that if we don't take up the wind turbines now with them, none of these investors would come to us.
All I mean is that the whole carbon neutral thing, your policy is completely riding on this, that there's no sort of subtext to it, that there's nothing which people can expose and say this is a sham or a piece of paper. This is an extremely audacious strategy, and just imagine how that could be. You could be there at Copenhagen as the voice of the most vulnerable developing countries in the world. And I think this is why the Indians will be not happy about the strategy that you've
I've mentioned this to India, that you should not be not happy. That we are not stopping anything going into India, are we?
No, but the Indian strategy is that we have a God-given right to high-carbon development, just as you've had in the US, and if we're going to give up this right, then you better pay us a lot of money. And what you've said is we will give up this right to high-carbon development because it's the right thing to do and because we believe in green growth. But that completely undercuts their position.
The problem that we find, Excellency, in these negotiations is that somehow or the other there is an impression created that we are the problem. Which is rather strange because our per capita emissions are very low. They are 1/20th that of the United States. So why should there be a focus on as if it is India which is standing in the way? Why don't you join hands together with us to deliver the kind of response that we need? But that response needs to be based on some principle of equity. You cannot say, I will stay where I am because I got here first, and you stay where you are because you are a latecomer. How can you sell it in your country? I cannot sell it in my country. I think if we reduce our emissions from 1.1 ton per capita to 0.5 tons per capita, would the problem be solved?
We understand all what India is saying, but India needs to come out and becoming the champion. Yeah. What I sometimes feel is now, what kind of impact would that have on the United States government?
But look at the climate bill which is before the Senate. Would you? Let us be honest, if you look at that bill, would you come to the conclusion that the United States believes that we are near the end of the world?
No, they don't.
So why is the end of the world only for us?
Enuge kantadden algun me be gengulenge sarukarunga be gengule ege plan niya harterega maseketta algun me tanagane ve paragane veruga imme boda eka kantata goso viraruga kuriyel lage peren engeta Hello, very good, Kevin. How are you? Yes. Yeah. So I could really, talk to the Indian Prime Minister, and I'm fairly confident about India. But with China, they don't need an agreement. They don't need any of these things, actually. But we do, so they can't be spoiling for us. Okay, and please send me that text, and I'll see you on the 13th, or 14th rather. China में हूँ बोले नहीं हो चला को एमी उन्हें मोली दुनिया के एमे बड़ा दुंगार वामी मी हूँ ना गेलिंग अंगे चंगो चीकी है नों ते आहारों ना अंगे चल दिपुना नुदी ही पांटानी के नेतन
कौन सा का चाइना में बस
इंटरनेशनली मेजर कुरा केमी हूँ नहीं दे ये वाक़े की केमी हूँ बेनु बेनु वाले के इंटरनेशनल सोवरेंटी दूको नहीं मिया ये कम चाइना में बेनु बेनु वाले आइसोलेट वाक़े ऐसे पूरा नहीं है मैं अवन में नेविस वर्क करेंगे तो कोपेनहेगन का
मिहार कोपेनहेगन इंगा कंटेंट में G77 डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज के स्टैंडिंग मां बड़ा हम डेवलप कंट्रीज के दोस्त वाला मुलिंग हुरिया को डेवलप कंट्रीज दबा करो एक तो कब इसका में करेंगे दैट इज G77 पोजीशन अगर मैं सॉल्यूशन एक में बार गिरने में देखे डेवलप कंट्रीज इज डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज इज अगर मैं के positioning established kurmanta ka Denmark pressure ki me aneket kurani that we are forced to contend with igata
Denmark me algon men invite kurani ki ene norpana ka wegen algon me ta batan furta me duwa hues in ethanu ge Copenhagen ge international press ka algon men gossa figawa gotakun aw em bihas awaka algon men benumani bodu ek media event
We'll hear from President Mohammed Nasheed in a few minutes. I'm told that he's on his way here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mohammed Nasheed, the President of the
Thank you. 4 years ago, I sat in solitary confinement, but in spite of the odds, we refused to give up hope. We won our battle for democracy in the Maldives. A year later, there are those who tell us that solving climate change is impossible. Well, I am here to tell you that we refuse to give up hope. My message to you is continue the protest. Continue despite the odds. And eventually, together, we will reach that crucial number 350. 350. 350. 350. 350. And thank you.
What is your demand? What are you demanding here?
We want to survive, and we have to have an arrangement to survive.
President.
Presidents, prime ministers, and leading activists are arriving in Copenhagen for a last-ditch attempt to cut carbon dioxide emissions. And with time running out, they remain deadlocked over money and gases.
China mihun edukola daniya ramharu tiya marwan mintarani etana draft nene neri fa China miya kari komme sentence ko aha koba he kade ga masse bas ene etana beru wanden aha vegetable denno ne fruit as
We put in the language peaking year of 2015, which is what we need to achieve 1.5 and 350. The 350 and that are really our two absolutely crucial points.
We need to put that in.
Yes. So we've given them the language, so we're trying to make it easy and trying to be absolutely a cooperative party here where they can then use this as the negotiating text from now on.
President Rashid, we have hundreds of millions of Chinese viewers getting to know Maldives, but are you aware that there are people out there saying that global warming is a conspiracy and certain countries, particularly Maldives, is the #1 beneficiary?
Of course, there are people who doesn't believe that the world is round. There are people who still don't believe that man has landed on moon. So a few skeptics saying these things will not change the reality of any fact.
Don't you think at this very particular moment it is up for U.S. politicians and statesmen to decide and determine the final outcome of this conference? Because China has already committed.
What China has committed is not enough to save us. And we would want China to commit more. It's not only up to the U.S., it's up to the Chinese as much as the U.S. government.
工业化、城镇化快速发展的关键阶段，能源结构以煤为主，降低排放存在着特殊的困难。
Mr. President, I just want to thank you for what you're doing here.
Thank you so much.
And good luck.
So please, you could do this.
Mr. President, your proposal on the table has been rebuffed by China and India, and scientists at the same time are saying it may already be impossible to keep global temperatures down to 1.5 degrees Celsius because of the carbon that's already in the atmosphere. So could it be counterproductive, this proposal on the table?
Well, it's politics, and we all of us have to be ready to negotiate.
There's a lot of discussion about what options are on the table if this conference doesn't achieve its goals and sea levels rise. What are the plans for the Maldives?
None. We will all die.
Very, very tight schedule.
What the hell? Conference of the parties of the conference of the conference.
The talks nearly did collapse over and over. There were attempts to change the text to reflect small island states' demands that temperature rises be capped at 1.5 degrees Celsius because the preferred 2 degrees would see them underwater. But China blocked the change.
We were hoping that tonight would be a very happy evening. I don't now see that happening. And it's simply madness of China and India not to take it up. It is simply madness. Just because the West has pumped so much poisonous gas up into the atmosphere, that doesn't mean that we have to do it again. We can lose many, many battles, but we cannot lose the war.
Hundreds of protesters were arrested yesterday. They are demanding a global agreement on reducing greenhouse gases, but they may end up disappointed. The talks are not going well. China reportedly saying that it sees no hope for a deal this week.
The G77 group of developing countries led a walkout on Monday.
Right now, there are a lot of signs that are pointing to the fact that this may not actually happen. And officials who've been directly involved in negotiations, they say it's deadlocked.
Very disappointed. Morning, Mark. How are you?
Thank you very much for asking.
Now, what I understand is what countries are offering is short of what we are expecting.
The absolutely crucial thing is that we've lost 350 from the text already, and if we sacrifice 350 now, then you know we're kissing goodbye to the coral reefs, and if we don't get that language back now, then it's gone probably forever. And by ever, I don't mean the rest of this week. I mean for the rest of this century.
You know, if we kind of relent a little bit on 350 and come out and see how we can have a concrete another clean agreement which moves on to 350 at some point.
But Mr. President, you don't want, you've said, and you mean this, I presume, that you don't want to sign a national suicide note. We have to consider what that actually means. I mean, what the numbers need to be in order not to sign away the future of your country.
Let me ask you, if we walk out, do we get it?
No.
Then
I think the strong public statements we've made in the past, which are the positions that we seek for our survival, that should remain as it is.
Yeah, but we need a deal in Copenhagen. We need to come out with a deal, and I feel that Maldives can be instrumental in getting a deal.
Sorry, President. You should not lower the ambitions on 1.5 degrees.
So what?
Because that's what we have been saying.
Okay, we hold on to this 1.5 degrees and 350, and what? If we come out from here without some form of an understanding, I fear that this whole thing can be dragged on and on and on for a very long time without any understanding.
අනේ කාලොන්ගේ ඔයින් ඉච්ච ගරුන්ගේ moral grounds එක moral grounds compromise කොගෙනවා මෙහර මියුන ෆීල් ගන්නවා කොමස් බේ කරුන්ගේ ගන්න දුරියාදු දවුන දෙකී අරන් මෙන්ගේ බස් මියුන අඩෝහණි අරන්ගේ moral grounds ඔන්නත් moral grounds නොන්නාන ගොත compromise කරපන්නේ so I think he will eventually listen to us නේද
Good morning. Sorry, are we late?
Sorry. Smile.
From the EU side, their plans for emission reductions.
Yeah.
But they're going for 20%.
Well, they should go for 30. If they say they're going for 30, this is going to put more pressure on the Chinese.
No, Mario, very sorry, I was in the phone call.
No, it's okay.
Thank you very much.
If heads of state can come up with a text, I just hope that it can be done.
How are you?
How are you?
Okay, man.
we cannot maintain our position and come out with an agreement. Ultimately, I think we would have to make a lot of concessions to come out with an agreement. Concessions in terms of mitigation, in terms of adaptation, I don't think we should make any kind of concession at all.
I agree absolutely. Maybe we say at a maximum 2 degrees.
Yeah.
At a maximum.
We are armed with MSRI is back. Emma productive for them become Korea get there. Aharmang, Gilap and Neti, arm and bar Korea get there. Then Emma productive for Arma American Kuram become a kidding. We are in a text to 350, a language, Egotanino, Ea Dimana, Devenagotim. Ekam Anangam 450, Yam Mihar Midani. Ekang Harmana Ingipa, Ekang Hingalal Koketibum, 350 Kan Mudevenakang, 350 Jahag and William Verima, Gileni Larkola.
And publicity, Oti Kibran Kangedo, and publicity. No, publicity, Oti, because people love you for what you said.
Alugada Vara Rangalang, Alugada Hama, Alipu Yaya, unclear emphasis. Minister now, scientist tunge head to Nukunanji and minister.
I'm a minister. Scientist, no scientist, no. That's it.
This is crunch time. The head of the U.S. delegation says progress is being made, but there is still a long way to go, and time is running out.
We are not going to leave Copenhagen with a legally binding agreement. What I'm hoping for is to have an understanding on the core values of these things, and then have a number of layers, and as you peel, and one day you will reach that.
I mean, China is the only party at these talks that doesn't want a deal, probably. Yeah. It's really between China and the US. Even the US, this is the first time I've ever been to one of these meetings where the US actually wants a deal. Because Obama can't walk out of here empty-handed.
We did have another issue we wanted to flag.
Yeah.
The meeting with the Chinese premier. You know what they're planning to do? So you walk in, you're being very, very intransigent on climate change, and basically China's puppets. They allow the press to come in. The Chinese premier says 3 things. You're not allowed to say anything. The press leave. They lock.
Exactly that. Let them do that. I will be their puppet. It's better to be their puppet, seen to be their puppet, than the Americans and Australians and the British. We have to be seen that we have the reach to China, that we have the reach to everybody.
Your message is that you're trying to bring the world together to save the talks from collapse by communicating between these different intransigent parties.
We need to talk about substance.
Absolutely.
Now we should come to a conclusion. Because you have to go back to your people, I have to go back to my people. So
from the Chinese protocol.
Yes, that's right. Would you please tell us which ones?
The Chinese government should be knowing this. The Grenada Prime Minister is sitting beside my president.
Yeah. So this, the Prime Minister of Grenada?
Yes, next to my president. Next to the Maldives president, my president.
That's the president of Sudan who is talking?
Sudan is on the other side.
Sorry, Maldives.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, we have a plan. we're going to win it today.
President Nasheed, for BBC News, what do you make of what's happening?
I think it's going good.
Do you think you will get a deal that you think is worthwhile?
I really need to get out of this place.
Are we going to have an agreement?
I think we will.
Do you think you failed, though, on the big question?
I don't think we will fail.
Watch out. Excuse.
The latest is it's changing every minute, fluid at best. Some would say in disarray. The moment President Obama arrived here, he went immediately to an unscheduled meeting with more than 16 world leaders, many here believe, to rescue some sort of agreement. So frantic efforts underway, but still very much in doubt as to what they'll accomplish.
Okay, I ask for a little bit of patience. Obviously, we can't determine exactly when that meeting is finishing.
We can still see failure, but we need to prepare for success, because Nasheed's been on the inside of this. You know, he's one of about 15 or 20 heads of world leaders at this point. A collapse of this talks would be an absolute disaster.
It was always going to be difficult to get 192 nations to sign up to a single agreement. Some leaders here say these are the toughest negotiations they have ever been involved.
Areas of disagreement are as wide as ever. I understand that the meeting has just broken up. It's been taking place between about 30 world leaders, and I gather that the real problem is relations between China and the United States.
So when do we get to see the text?
You give a text to Mark.
I see the numbers.
The number is the
2050
number. The 2050 number is here. There's 2050 number.
So the text is, I think, okay. And it's just that no one agrees on the text.
No, I think there's a broad agreement among the group now, I think.
Right. But there's no agreement with China, so I think we'll have to sign this without China.
But the Chinese will not let themselves be isolated, right? They'll have to do something.
They will try to get a block of G77 with them.
You know, the whole world thinks that America's blocking this.
Yeah, but no.
These press is idiots. They've got this 20-year-old sort of post-colonial mentality.
India's really funny, you know, it's moving from here to here, and it has no central position.
Eventually be on the right side.
Isn't India hiding behind China? They're going to do the talk?
Well, I think initially the idea in India was to be a Canada, to completely hide from everything.
But
and
they
just
couldn't.
Oh, my goodness.
No, but I think most people would sign. Bangladesh would sign.
They would. So India's the key one then. Does India go with China, or does India go with everyone else?
India goes with Maldives, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, about half an hour ago we were told there was no deal. I thought that came from you. It did. And then everything's turned around.
It turns around in every 10 minutes.
In a heartbeat. I thought it was just us outside, but it turns out it's inside the room as well.
We are now resuming the 12th meeting of the CMP.
Point of order, Mr. President. There is simply no consensus about this document. We're not going to recognize it. We don't want to discuss it. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, this document is one of the most disturbing developments in the history of the UNFCCC. We do ask you to withdraw this document.
Mr. Chairman, this is just one instance when Maldives is asking our friends, our developing country friends, to help us. Please accept this decision and please keep this document alive. We need this document for us to go on. There are many countries who need this document. It has many lifelines. And please, I would like to make this plea from the bottom of my heart to my fellow friends from the developing countries to accept this document and to adopt this decision. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I just want you to know that Australia will keep trying. We are not going to ignore the pleas of the President of the Maldives. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as the Prime Minister of Maldives has said, I think an action postponed is not in the interest of people who will be affected by climate change. So we fully back the document that is behind us.
On the basis of extensive consultations with parties, I will read out to you a draft decision. The Conference of the Parties decides to take note of the Copenhagen Accord of the 18th of December 2009. I hear no objections, so decided.
There was high drama in Copenhagen today, where at the 11th hour, an agreement on global warming was hammered out.
The deal done among 25 rich and poor nations, pledging to work together to fight climate change.
Despite setbacks, world leaders reach an agreement on climate change.
The agreement calls for a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by all nations, calls for a reduction, but doesn't require a reduction.
And my good friend Mohammed Nasheed is actually the hero of tonight. I can tell you this truly because people was blocking it. And then Mohammed Nasheed made a very, very strong intervention. And at the very end, we were successful.
I don't think there's anyone's making any pretenses about this. But this has all been done to try and salvage some kind of climate, some kind of climate regime out of this whole process. The Chinese wanted to leave here with nothing, and they very nearly got there. But the point of this is that we've still got some process alive, and there were parties in that room who didn't want that to happen, and you know who they are.
I understand that this is not the complete binding document, but it has features that it can migrate to become a very good planet-saving document. Mama Arabi Arab kame mi ko nimma lewani hama mi demme agreement me libuni hama mi ta hori moli duniya mi har dakkan de dus nuni ta mi vi ekam da molin da hama ek chik damagati hama
On s'est battu pour parvenir à un accord à Copenhague. Mais il suffit de rentrer aux Maldives pour se rendre compte à quel point toute solution est impossible. On se retrouve à devoir rogner sur la santé et l'éducation pour pouvoir bétonner le littoral et construire des digues. Malgré tout, on essaie de faire bouger les choses.
Les gens de ma génération mourront sur ces îles. Savoir que mon grand-père repose en paix est un sentiment merveilleux. Je refuse que sa tombe soit emportée par la mer. C'est ce qui fait de nous des êtres humains. Notre lien avec le passé et notre espoir pour l'avenir. Je ne veux pas que mes enfants perdent tout ça.
J'ai très peur pour l'avenir de mes enfants. Parfois, je préférerais ne pas en avoir eu. Ce monde n'est pas fait pour eux. Je suis beaucoup plus pessimiste que mon mari. Lui voit toujours les choses du bon côté. Toujours.
Il fallait apporter la démocratie aux Maldives. Car je refusais que mes enfants connaissent l'isolement carcéral. Et je refuse qu'ils deviennent des réfugiés climatiques. On ne peut pas disparaître. C'est impossible.